Hello, everyone. My name is Walker McElrath, and I wanted to talk about part two. More importantly, I wanted to talk about the what was it? Resumes, interviews, and negotiations. I am My last semester is this next coming semester, so I should graduate in December. So I found this really helpful in that I was able to make a really good resume. I was able to make a really good cover letter, and I was able to do a mock job interview. So I actually found this class really helpful in that regard to kind of get some practice into when I'm going to be entering the workforce here in the next month or here in the next few months. And hopefully I'll be able to get a job, fingers crossed, in right out of college with some of the skills that this class has taught me. I've got my cover letter here. Kind of some of the things that it showed me was kind of how to space everything on the top with my name and all of my information. And then kind of in the meat of it, I tried to kind of what I'd always been taught was you need to kind of show yourself off because no one else is going to do that. Excuse me. Because no one else is going to do that. So I write things like I have experience working in retail, and then I try to show like why that's helpful. Mostly that it helped me to like work with people and helped me to sell things. That was the first time I ever had to sell anything was working for Target. I remember I was trying to sell their charge card to people. And so that was like one of my big things to do and learning how to sell, and which is really helpful because I want to work in sales and promotions. The other big thing was I worked at a place called the YOC, which is a youth opportunity center, which is like most people know it as like a juvie kind of a thing, but mostly we would take kids in and try to help them get on their feet. And that taught me a lot of patience because a lot of those kids obviously don't want to be there. So I tried to write about that, and I always try to also show that I can work under pressure. So that was another big thing that I used on my cover letter. I also brought a copy of my resume, um, and kind of some of the stuff I picked up was just how to kind of space everything out. That like white space isn't necessarily the enemy, so you kind of want to have not too much white space, but it's not bad to have some white space in your resume. And kind of some of the things I talked about like my Ivy Tech. I went to Ivy Tech before Ball State. Talked about my minor, which is telecommunications, and talked about my other minor in just regular communications. I think I said telecommunications, so I have a minor in telecommunications and a minor in communications. Um, I worked for the radio station here, WCRD, and I DJ'd, and then I also worked kind of a little bit in their music department, just helping to pick music. So I just kind of use that to show that I have a little bit of TCOM experience, whereas I've not interned yet. So a lot of my peers have more experience than me. So I tried to highlight what little experience I do have. And then, yeah, I just went back to talking about like the YSC because I worked there for 2.5 years full time. So just like I worked with at-risk youth, learned how to deal with people and have patience, trained new employees to work as a team. That was another big one that I've tried to use is that I've trained people at the YOC, and then I currently work at Target. I've been there for about 3 years, and I've trained multiple people there. That's usually how I get to know people is I train them. So that's another big thing I've done. And then I talked about my experience at Target and kind of working with people, kind of all the things I talked about before. Taught me time management. That's another big one. Just shows that like I say, I can work under pressure, and that's not a big deal to me. Um, Kind of the other things that was kind of great that goes along with this chapter and this part were I did a mock interview, and I really don't like public speaking or kind of new stuff. I like to stay kind of in my lane, and so I've not done a lot of phone interviews. And we did a phone interview, and I had done one with a sales company earlier in the year, and I thought it went okay, but I didn't get past that point. So I really wanted to do a phone interview just to see if they had any tips. And we did it. I was super nervous, and he was asking me all kinds of questions. Then, kind of some of the feedback I got was that I need to, um, well, first off, I'm not nervous, or at least I don't sound nervous on the phone. It's more of something that I kind of reflect. So I wasn't super nervous, or I didn't sound super nervous, but kind of the big thing was in my opening, he asked me just to kind of talk about myself. And that question is so broad that I always struggle with it. So I just kind of talked about my like past work experience, or I talked about kind of my school experience and what has led me up to this point. Um, and I just need to. He said that that was a good opportunity to like have a story that you have ready. It's something that shows how like that you can like knock it out of the park. And I had like really good stories, and we kind of talked about. I have one story where I worked at when I was working at Target over the holidays, like maybe a couple years ago. I We had to sell what are called red cards, and they're basically like the debit cards or the charge cards. And they really encourage you to like move as many of those as you can in a shift. And most people don't do it, but I turned it into a game where I could try to sell as many of them as I could in a shift just to see how I could do it. And I ended up like moving 8 of them in like a 5-hour shift. So I told that story like later on in the interview, and he was like, "That's a really good story. You should think about using that up front, like try to work that into talking about yourself." And then there was another one where another story I had that I forget what prompt. I think it was like, tell me about experience working in sales. And I was doing a group project with 3 other people, and we had to make a campaign for a Wolf Boom radio station and like kind of make like Facebook stuff and like something for them to do on the radio and something for them to do on their email. And we kind of put together this thing. I suggested a radio idea that was they basically would play the dating game for like 3 months, and that would be like a huge campaign and how we would promote it. And that ended up doing really well when we presented it to the guy. And he was asked to rank our, like, there were 4 groups, and he was asked to rank them, which one he liked the most, which one he liked the least. And we ended up placing second, and I was really proud of that. And that was another story that he was like, you should use that. So I guess, like in summary, I really liked this chapter because it was a lot of stuff that like applies to like real life. Not to say that other stuff doesn't, but this is stuff that is on the horizon that I'm going to be dealing with this year. So I was really glad to be able to do this chapter and talk about and make a new resume, make a new cover letter, use some of the tips, and yeah. So I think it was I really liked part 2, chapter 4. Yeah, and thank you all for your time. I look forward to watching some of your videos. Bye.